Hello again. On this video I want to talk again about frightening thoughts. This is a problem that a number of people have come to me and asked about because it's a very disturbing thing to be in, where these thoughts are coming all the time. And I've already talked about these on a couple of other videos. So in this one I'm going to try and basically sort of summarise what I said and perhaps expand a bit on some areas that you might not have understood. Now, I want to dedicate this to my friend Carol because she's having problems with this particular thing at the moment, and try hopefully you'll understand what needs doing. Now, first thing to say about any of these thoughts, regardless of what they're talking about, whatever the fear is, the main thing you can say with complete certainty is they are lies. There is no truth in them at all, whatsoever. And I can say this because I understand what causes them, what to do about them. And for the minute, you probably are thinking the exact opposite. You think they must be telling you something important because of the way things happen. I'll explain that in a minute. Now, if you're in this state, whatever started your anxiety state in the first place, then you pretty soon realise that frightening thoughts is a very big part of this anxiety state. And the main reason that you find these thoughts so convincing and so real is because you are sensitized. And I've explained this sensitized state before. It's the state where your nervous system produces exaggerated stress feelings. That's the simple way to put it. Now, you feel, what happens is you have these frightening thoughts and you react to them physically. You feel fear in your body in some fashion, whatever form it takes with you. Whenever this happens, because you feel these strong reactions, you automatically think that these frightening thoughts must be important. Now, this is just the natural way we react. We gauge things via our feelings and how we feel about things. I think that's more so in some people than others. Some people can kind of think things over rather than feel them. But in any event, if you feel a strong reaction, then naturally enough, you think it must be saying something you need to listen to. Now, this is the first mistake you make by taking these thoughts seriously, which, like I said, it's quite understandable that you do. So, and to look at why is it that you get these thoughts in the first place? Now, whatever put you in an anxiety state, caused you to be afraid of something. Most likely it was something that happened to you physically. It doesn't have to be, it could be any number of reasons. But something caused you to think fearfully most of the time. And this is how the anxiety cycle starts, and this is how it continues, because you're frightening yourself, if I can put it like that, so much of the time. And this type of thinking kind of pushes everything else to one side. You find it very hard to concentrate, hard to remember. These thoughts just keep going on, and there seems to be little you can do about it. We'll talk about that presently. Now, if you want to sort of understand how this starts, or why it starts, you need to understand what happens at the beginning of your anxiety state. Something frightened you, and now you're in a state where you fear the feelings of fear themselves. So if you had any other problem, a stressful problem that you had to try and sort out, your mind would go around, look at the subject and try and figure out a solution. That's how we use our minds. We have a problem, we try and figure out the solution. So far so good. Now, if you look at the problem you have now with your anxiety state, you're trying to use the same approach, your mind is trying to use the same approach to solve that. And it's not going to work, because you're basically looking at fear of fear. There's no solution to it as such, in the sense of you solving another problem, any other problem. So what happens is, because there's no solution, your mind keeps on and on suggesting possible solutions. It has to, that's the way it works. And so as time goes on, these solutions become more and more ridiculous, and more scary, more and more impossible. And as the more strange they become, the more frightened of them you become too. Of course you do. That's how it works. Now, I can remember how it all started with me. I can remember how the cycle continued, and how big a part the frightening thoughts played in my anxiety state. It all started with me with a panic attack, and I didn't understand that. Nobody explained it to me. I'd never had anything like that before, and so I brooded on it. I was frightened by it, and I was frightened of it returning. And I tried to, because nobody explained it to me, I tried to find out my own answers, and I looked in books. That's all I had at the time, books on psychology, on medicine, all kinds of stuff I should have left well alone, but I didn't, I just kept on. And as time went on, and I was still in this sensitized state, which is how come I'd had the panic in the first place, as time went on, I began to think up more and more ridiculous reasons for why I was in this frightened state. And anything and everything became a possible source of fear. This is the other aspect that people don't appreciate, is that you become very suggestible. So anything is potentially a frightening thought, because it's this reaction again, it's this strong reaction. Now, under ordinary circumstances, that wouldn't be the case. You'd just, you'd be able to reason with it. But reason goes out the window when you're in an anxiety state. Trying to reason with these frightening thoughts just doesn't really work. So, in a moment, I'll explain what you need to do. Now, talking about my first experience of it, this is how it continued with me for weeks. I'm trying to find answers, looking at all this stuff I should have left alone. And as a small example of how this process works, I had, at one point I had a sort of a pain in my leg just below my knee, just an ache, nothing significant. But because of the way my mind was at that time, and the way my body was at that time, I started to dwell on that. And the more I dwelt on it, and the more I looked up medical books trying to find an explanation for this strange pain in my leg, the worse it got, and the area which hurt spread, and with that came more fearful thoughts about what it must mean. And I got to a point where I thought my leg was going to fall off or something, because I built this thing up from a tiny little beginning into this great huge problem where it wasn't anything of the kind. If I hadn't been in that state of mind, I would have just noticed it and then forgotten about it. So you see the difference there. This is how sensitization works. Everything is exaggerated. Now, I think it's kind of appropriate I'm talking about this now, because I've come to see that I've been doing the same thing again myself, only I hadn't realised just how much I've been doing it. Now, I've been thinking a lot about what to say on these videos, what to say on this one in particular, and it suddenly struck me the other day that, like I said, I've been frightening myself again, and once again I put myself in a position where I was sensitized, because recent months have been stressful has been external stresses, mostly of a financial kind. So, my nerves are taking a bit of a bashing because of that. Added to which, there's the stress I've had, the after effects of my stroke, trying to deal with that all the time. And so, that is, I found I really saw clearly that I've been frightening myself again over all sorts of ridiculous ideas, and I had what could be called, or what Claire Weeks used to call, a glimpse. I glimpsed the truth that these thoughts were just this process happening to me again, something that I had in the past many times, and all because I'd been in a stressful state and I'd started to let this type of thinking spread to other areas, rather than thinking about just the problem at hand, the external stresses such as, the money and so on. This process had spread to all sorts of other things. So I started to dwell on how I was physically. I was anyway, because like I said, there's stroke after effects I had to deal with. But then it spread further, and I hadn't realised this was happening. I didn't see it. The most obvious thing, I didn't see it happening, and I know this stuff. I've known about it for years. But anyway, the other day I suddenly woke up and I thought, you fool, why are you doing this to yourself? The external problems haven't gone away, so I'm still basically stuck with that for the time being. But it was just suddenly, like I say, it's a glimpse. This is what Claire Weeks says happens when your body starts to desensitize. You start to glimpse the truth about frightening thoughts. You begin to see them for what they are, just stupid thoughts that don't have any importance. And she said, as you glimpse, you can think of a particular sentence that will kind of summarize what these thoughts are. Like, one she used to use was, they're just silly thoughts in a tired mind. Silly thoughts in a tired mind. Something you can say to yourself whenever these thoughts come to your head, and it kind of reinforces the notion that these are not to be taken seriously. So how does this work? How does this whole thing start to die down? How do you recover from it? Well, you need to look at the recovery from the anxiety state itself. It is the sensitization that needs to heal. I found once I figured out what was going on all those years ago, I figured out exactly the reason for it. Once I'd done that, then the thoughts kind of took care of themselves. I didn't sort of consciously go about. I used to think, once I first read Claire Weeks, I used to use her approach, but by that time, the sensitization had mostly gone. So, it's not something you have to specifically tackle. Now, the thing to say about this, of course, which I haven't actually said yet, is whatever you've tried to do so far to prevent these thoughts from happening has probably failed you. It's not worked at all. In fact, whatever attempts you've made have probably been of a kind of fighting type behaviour. You're trying to stop yourself thinking this. It's like the old saying that if you try not to think of a pink elephant, try and do that, you will think of a pink elephant. Of course you will, because that's the way your mind works. Same principle. The more you try and force your thoughts to think a different way, the more these frightening thoughts will keep coming at you. So, what do you do? What can you do? Well, the only thing you can do is accept that these thoughts are there at the moment. It's having an understanding of why they're there, having an understanding of the role sensitization plays in them being there. And once you get that, once you see and accept that however real and convincing they seem, they are nothing of the kind, gradually you start to glimpse more and more of what's happening here. You actually glimpse the truth, that there's no danger, there's no reality to any of this stuff. Now, that's how it was for me. I tackled the sensitization the first time around. The sensitization healed, and the thoughts just faded. That's how it works. Now, as I am now, like I said, I've had this same problem again. And you're going to say, well, does that mean I'm always going to have this kind of thing happening in my life? Am I always going to be frightened by my thoughts? And no, that's not the case. I mean, I had this particular episode of my life has been difficult. I've had, I think, more than my fair share of stress of one sort or another. And my nervous system has reacted to that stress. So, but now I finally understand what I've been doing to myself and how I've been sucked in, if you like, into this process again. I can deal with it. I can think, well, it's the same old thing. It's the same thing as I've had before. So you don't need to fear the future in terms of this happening to you again. It's the same with any of the aspects of anxiety. If you get yourself better by using the right approach to it, by using this method I talk about, so that you're no longer afraid of fear, then once you're no longer afraid of fear, you're no longer afraid of the physical symptoms of fear, and you're no longer afraid of the thoughts, the frightening thoughts that come with this fear. So you don't need to worry about how you will be in the future, because you'll have conquered your fear. So even it wouldn't matter what you thought. It's the sensitization that is the fault, is to blame here. And if you're not sensitized, and if you heal yourself of that sensitization by using this approach, then it won't matter. None of it will matter. And as you recover from this, you'll see for yourself how this works. Now, I remember very vividly how it was for me the first time, because what happened was, once I realised what was going on, I started again to go back and do the things that I used to do before all of this happened. Now, in the beginning, I know when you're really bad with this situation, this kind of thinking just kind of continues, and thinking of anything else is really hard work. It can be. But what I did first time around is to start going back to the things I used to enjoy doing, just briefly doing them, just making attempts to do them. And I was still too distracted by this thinking at first. But then I just persisted. I thought, well, I'll just do this. I'm not going to try and stop thinking these frightening thoughts, but I will do something else and have all the thoughts just prattling away in my head at the same time. Gradually, I found I was doing more things that I used to enjoy doing. Lots of things like, I used to do stuff in the garden. I used to listen to the radio a lot. I used to listen to music a lot. Things, just simple things I used to do, and turn my attention elsewhere, away from the fear. I wasn't forcing this in any way. Like I said, I was letting the fear thoughts be there. But the more I did this, and the more I saw, the more I lost interest, let's put it that way. I lost interest in this frightening thinking. And that's basically what you need to do. Firstly comes the understanding of what is happening, why it is happening. Second becomes the being prepared to let these thoughts happen for now, realizing that they are temporary, and that as you desensitize, the thoughts sort themselves out and they fade away. And third is to find other things to occupy your mind with, not in a fighting way, not in a forcing way, just as little or as much as you feel like doing. And with me, like I said before, it took me about 2 months from the worst sensitized state I was in to actually not being sensitized at all. Admittedly, that was an ideal situation I had. I've said this before too, so don't sort of think of 2 months, that's it. 2 months, I've got 2 months to get better. And no, it doesn't work like that. Everybody takes their own time. Some people it can be faster, some people slower. But understand, once you're on that path and once you've decided to use these ideas to get yourself better, then recovery is inevitable. It has to happen. Anyway, I don't want to make this video too long, but I just really want to emphasize that, again, it's quite logical when you understand what's actually happening here. And when you understand, you can start to reason. You can start to reason with things better. You know the causes, you know that it doesn't matter that it's happening, you know it's not signifying anything else, and you know what you need to do to recover. That's it, really. I mean, of course, one thing I haven't said, of course, is that, being subject to these thoughts, people automatically assume that there's something wrong with their sanity. They think they're losing it in some fashion. And this is, of course, made worse by the fact that these thoughts get stranger and weirder all the time while you continue to fight them. And the more that goes on, the more you think, oh God, what is happening to me? I'm losing my mind. People genuinely think that's what's happening. And I don't want to talk much longer, but I will just say one more thing on the types of thought. Because I know three different types of thought that can come in this state. The first is a thought that you might carry out some action that you don't want to carry out. It's the sort of thing that you fear you might hurt somebody deliberately. That sort of thought. The second thought is fears about yourself. Fears, like I was just saying, about your sanity, about your physical health. Fear that there's something incurably wrong with you that's going on. And the third type is the kind of compulsive thought. The thought that if you have to do a certain action in a certain way at a certain time even, that if you don't do that, then something terrible is going to happen to you. Now, in a sensitized person, you can call it a compulsion. For somebody who's not sensitized, a lot of people have these sort of behaviors which they call superstitions. They have to do a particular thing in order to avoid bad luck. That's how it works. And so those are the three, at least in my experience, the three main types of thinking that you can indulge in. But again, it's getting over the initial misunderstanding, and then when you've had a bit more practice at this, you can start to challenge the thoughts. Now, I wouldn't advise this at the beginning because your ability to reason is not working terribly well. But as you improve, you can start to treat thoughts in that way, where they sort of call their bluff. You say, for whatever the thought is saying, you say, okay, go ahead, do it, make that happen. And at the moment, you probably think, well, how could I possibly dare to do that? I'm just trying to point out that this, you're calling the bluff, and if you do that, you're actually taking all the steam out of these thoughts. Like, for example, if you thought you're worried about hurting somebody deliberately, you say to the thought, okay then, well, go ahead, make me do that. And if you actually thought that, you think, no, I couldn't possibly do that. You realise then that these thoughts are just stupid thoughts. And if it actually came to doing the thing you fear doing, you could not do it. You know, the fear itself, because you are fearful in this way, is the fear itself that's actually preventing you ever doing anything like that. It's just, it's like a brake that prevents you doing anything that you imagine yourself capable of. And I know some people get very upset by these type of thoughts, especially if it relates to their loved ones or their children or something like that. They're horrified, and they think, how can I be thinking in this way? And along with that, they come to think of themselves as being terribly bad, awful people because they're thinking these dreadful thoughts. And they're not that way at all. It's just the manifestation of their sensitized nervous system. Doesn't matter what the thought is, doesn't matter how weird it is, doesn't matter at all. So yeah, that's another approach to take. Call the bluff. And I've done that quite a bit with things over the years. Some of the things I've been frightened of, I just said, oh, to hell with it, go ahead, I don't care. That is basically what I did with panic attacks. I told panic attacks to do their worst, and I said, go ahead, go on, kill me if you're going to. And that's how I stopped panic attacks, which I've talked about elsewhere. Anyway, I don't want to wish on for too long, but I just thought I'd add that last bit just to emphasize the fact that it doesn't matter how strange or horrible or horrific these thoughts may seem to you, they don't mean a thing. They don't mean a damn thing. Anyway, on that note, I think I better leave it at that and just practice again. Practice as I've talked about a lot. And you'll begin to realise that you've been bluffed by all this stuff. Bluffed by all this stuff. So, for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.